I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics, messianicapologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider, your theology and news roundup for August the 27th, 2025. We do have a shorter episode for today than we did for Monday and Tuesday, but I would like to make the observation of how in about a month or so, we will be commemorating the fall high holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot. If you are feeling that matters in the world are getting darker and they're getting more tense, you would not be alone. Right before I got ready to begin this episode, I had to pray and remind the Lord. I know that we as believers, as your people, have access to the infinite power of heaven. But we need you, Lord, and we need your protection, and we need your guidance through this period of time as we don't know what is next. I mean, there are a lot of people who think that we are on the cusp of seeing the 7-year period, the 70th week of Daniel begin. Others think that forces of good in the world are going to stave off some of this for a period of time. To be honest, I don't know, but I do believe we have to be paying attention. And there are some other things which have occurred over the past few days which have caused me to be very concerned about our future, and in particular, how people are responding or not responding to certain things. Okay, so let's begin with our theology roundup. Okay, so our theology roundup follows a very important theme of end-time prophecy. This is taken from our ministry book, When Will the Messiah Return? The Dangers of Pre-Tribulationism, this combination book, which we released right before the Messiah 2025 conference about 2 months ago now. You can get it in both paperback as well as ebook. All right, so our discussion, and I'm going to have to switch windows, involves how will we as God's people, the redeemed, how will we meet the Messiah? Because this is something very important as it concerns what the second coming is and what it involves, and whether or not the pre-tribulation rapture has some of the support many think it has. So this is a short analysis, but I think it's going to be very useful for you. How will we meet the Messiah? In 1 Thessalonians 4:17, Paul asserted that the righteous will meet the Lord in the air, New American Standard. To some, it may seem that this meeting is only an encountering, but what will actually occur is much more involved. The Greek term which is translated meet in this verse is apantesis. The Vine Lexicon notes how it is used in the papyri of a newly arriving magistrate, in reference, of course, to its ancient classical usage. A notable place where apantesis is used in the apostolic scriptures is Acts 28:15. And the brethren, when they had heard about us, came from there as far as the market of Appius and 3 inns to meet apantesis us. And when Paul saw them, he thanked God and took courage. Acts 28:15, New American Standard. Okay, and you can see here, look in the footnote, the Greek elthon es apantesin hemin more literally is came to a meeting with us, from the Brown and Comfort interlinear. This verse records how the believers in Rome went out to meet Paul as far as the market of Appius and the Three Inns, or Three Taverns. And then, according to Acts 28:16, we came into Rome, Revised Standard Version. This usage of apantesis is an excellent indication how at his return, number one, the meeting will involve Yeshua's coming to earth to establish his throne. Number two, that the holy ones or saints will be gathered up into the clouds to meet him. And number three, immediately following, the company of redeemed will all go back to the earth together. Just as the Roman believers met Paul just outside of the city, and they all entered into Rome together, so will the righteous, those just resurrected and those transformed, meet the Lord and return to the earth with him. Yeshua is indeed returning as a newly appointed magistrate to this planet, and he will establish the Torah as its constitution. He will rule in power and majesty, as the psalmist exclaimed, "You shall break them with a rod of iron, you shall shatter them like earthenware." Psalm 2:9, New American Standard. The prophet Isaiah further decreed, "It will come about that in the last days the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of the mountains and will be raised above the hills, and all the nations will stream to it, and many peoples will come and say, 'Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us concerning his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For the law will go forth from Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem." Isaiah 2:2-3, New American Standard. Also Micah 4:2. And used as some of the words in a very popular Messianic praise song. I sincerely hope that a select few, perhaps living at the actual time of the end, may persevere long enough to be among those privileged ones who get to meet the Messiah in the clouds, never having died, as he comes to restore his kingdom on earth. So to review, yes, 1 Thessalonians 4:17, we will meet the Lord in the air. That's apantesis. And a significant place where apantesis is used is Acts 28:15, where the brothers and sisters, hearing about Paul coming to Rome, they went out of Rome, meeting him at the market of Appius and Three Inns. And so in a similar way, we will, as the redeemed, meet the Lord in the air, and then we will all return to the earth together. And once again, and let me switch windows back. This has been taken from our ministry publication, "When Will the Messiah Return? The Dangers of Pre-Tribulationism." And this has actually been on our list of topics to address for quite some time. All right, so I said this would be a slightly shorter episode compared to Monday and Tuesday. I mean, there's a lot that goes into these episodes, and to be honest with you, it does take a lot out of you to sit down and give a teaching and then have to do some of the post-production work to get it sent out to different subscribers and what have you. When you're also editing 3 books simultaneously. So your prayers, your encouragement, definitely appreciated. All right, so let's get into our news roundup. There are some important stories to go through. We do the news roundup after the theology roundup because the news is time sensitive and it changes from day to day and stories develop. We know that because the 2 top things we need to be praying for are peace, Israel and Gaza, peace, Russia, Ukraine. And of course, we also have some significant situations here on the American home front and other things we need to be aware of, because we're living in some, if we don't see some things change, we're entering into some very dark times. And you can just feel the tension in the air. You can feel the anxiety on the part of a lot of people. And it's very worrisome and it's very bothersome. So we as believers have to make the most of the time God has allotted to us. And this is especially true about someone like me because this next weekend on Sunday, we're going to be remembering the 6th anniversary of my grandmother Jeffrey's passing, and she made it to almost 101. She had about 4 more months or so to go. And we'll also on Monday be remembering the 33rd anniversary of my father's passing. So, we're very sensitive to matters of time, matters of when we are, that sort of thing. And, as my father's successor, I have been able to live over 3 years past the time he has lived. He made it to 41 and a half. I'm going to be 45 in December. But there are a lot of things that I have not been able to do in my life. He was able to do, and vice versa. But along with that, you're like, am I on borrowed time? And how do I make the most of my time here on earth? And so a big part of it is trying to help people in today's Messianic community stay stable and stay grounded, especially with all of the, chaos we see. And honestly, I don't see a lot of people in today's Messianic community, teachers, leaders, people in congregations attempting to do this. They're just going on as though it's going to be business as usual. Oh, let's get another teaching from the Torah. Let's get another teaching from this. And they're not really paying attention to things the way they should be. Even though anti-Zionism, anti-Judaism is, skyrocketing at higher and higher levels all the time. And far too many people in conservative evangelicalism are not speaking out when they should. Okay, our first story, and this has been reposted by Charlie Kirk. Wow. Director Tulsi Gabbard confirms that she's uncovered multiple burn bags tucked away in safes and random back offices that contain intel on the politicization of the 2020 election. Was 2020 really the most secure election in history? So we know one of the big things which is going to start hitting in the next few months will be Russiagate. We know that Epstein is also going to be hitting. What are we going to find out about election 2020? I don't know. But there are going to be a lot of people who are upset, angry, disappointed, let down, and more so, who can I trust? That's what they're going to be, really having to sort through. We can trust the eternal God, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. All of these people, whether they're on the right or on the left, are mortal. They will make mistakes. They will fail us. This is a time period with the fall high holidays impending. Be sure that you plug into the Lord. All right, from Charisma, My Charisma, August the 26th. Jack Hibbs issues urgent warning to the church on growing deception. And this mainly has to do with replacement theology. Now, Jack Hibbs, founder of Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, California, so he's going to be dispensational. He does come against replacement theology, mainly those in the Reformed camp. He did not mince words about the dangers of this belief system. They say Israel has no right to God any longer. They are the Christ killers. They blew it, and everything that God promised to Israel is now promised to the church. Yes, and then he concludes, it justifies first of all and spreads anti-Semitic thought. Okay, so we know that anti-Semitism is on the rise. We know that replacement theology is what many conservatives who really don't support Israel, what they tend to escape into. We know that there are various levels of replacement theology. So, for example, there are people who believe that the church is some new Israel, but they do believe the state of Israel can exist, not necessarily because of biblical promises, but because of Jewish self-determination. But then there are those who espouse, really hard and fast replacement theology. The church is a new Israel. You see this in a lot of the Christian nationalist movement, and you see the Christian nationalist movement becoming even sympathetic to Nazism from the 1930s. And that is very upsetting, very disturbing, very scary. And, there are a lot of people right now who are just in la-la land. And if they're of a pre-tribulation rapture mindset, they're like, well, God's just going to beam us out of here. I know a lot of people in today's Messianic Jewish sphere of influence, and they're not paying attention to any of this because, well, we don't go into conspiracies. When actually this is stuff being discussed in mainstream, certainly religious publications. So we can't just avoid any of these things. Sooner or later, the wrong person may actually show up to your Messianic congregation or synagogue. And if you haven't had some kind of preliminary discussion or preliminary briefing about it, are you going to know what to do? All right, here's a post which was forwarded on from Vivid. She recommends, I believe it's a she, but anyway, Vivid recommends, this must go viral. The world must see this. In less than 130 seconds, Donald Trump exposed how the entire Palestinian society is praising Jewish deaths and teaching their children to hate and murder. Yeah, look, we do pray for peace to break out between Israel and Gaza. We pray for the return of the hostages. We pray for a quick resolution to this because the people who want this conflict over more than anyone else are the Israelis themselves. They're tired of war. They're tired of killing. But yeah, these kinds of things do go on in the Palestinian areas, raising many young people to think that being a terrorist is a good thing, and it's not. Okay, to the American home front from Newsmax yesterday, August the 26th. Democrats are opposing President Donald Trump's promise to send in the National Guard, saying Trump is a dictator, but Trump fired back saying he does not care how they smear him as long as crime in Democrat-run sanctuary cities stops. I'm not a dictator, Trump said in an open media event before a cabinet meeting Tuesday in the White House, which aired live on Newsmax and the Newsmax 2 streaming platform. I just know how to stop crime. So yeah, there are a lot of questions, a lot of comments, a lot of people thinking that with what Trump has done to stop a lot of the crime in Washington, D.C., and then move out to some of these other places, namely with Chicago now being focused upon, that Trump is going to be turning into a dictator. He's going to overturn legal precedents. He's going to overturn, legally elected local governments and officials. But we do have a problem in some of these larger urban areas with crime. And, I'm glad that my area, the North Texas, Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, hasn't been focused on among those areas. But a lot of people are going to come to conclusions, and even various religious people who are looking for potential anti-Messiah, antichrist candidates, they might decide, hey, maybe this demonstrates that Trump is the beast. I don't know. All right, another story from Charisma, and we've definitely talked about this before, and it involves the whole issue of the Greater Israel theory, or what's being touted as that. What is Greater Israel, and why were so many offended by Netanyahu's apparent support for the idea? Many of you have seen this map circulate, and it's the idea that what constitutes today's state of Israel is not exactly the borders of biblical Israel. And this huge chunk of the Middle East involving parts of Iraq, Saudi Arabia, most of Syria, all of Jordan, parts of Egypt, all of Lebanon. Those are the biblical borders of Israel. But there are a lot of people who questioned whether or not this is entirely accurate. You might see some Orthodox Jews come to this conclusion, but there are others who are not so convinced. And I would be one of those. I've seen this map passed around different Messianic venues, and I've challenged people because, I mean, just logically speaking, here you have ancient which is in Kuwait, where Abraham was from. Why would the promised land include where Abraham was originally from? It shouldn't, because God told Abraham, get up and I will take you to a land you have not seen. Not, I will give you this land and much more. So here you see, and mind you, Greater Israel is a term that has been used in many different ways over the years, but it is often used to describe the ideal borders of the land of Israel. Okay. And here you see a reference to Genesis 15, 18 through 21. To your seed, I give this land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates. That's why some come up with this big giant map encompassing the Middle East, or most of the Middle East. Now, this is where things get interesting, and it's even recognized as such by this article. While the description of the land based on rivers appears to be very large, as many scholars interpret the river of Egypt to be the Nile and stretching all the way to the Euphrates, the boundaries are not clearly delineated, and the mentioning of the people groups refers almost exclusively to those living within the borders of the modern state of Israel, along with small parts of the modern states of Jordan and Lebanon. Yes, of course. And why is this the case? Okay, so many conservative biblical scholars recognize that, look, the modern day state of Israel, it's not the biblical borders of Israel. The biblical borders of Israel are larger, but as that article acknowledges, the people groups are from basically this area. So draw a big circle around the modern day state of Israel, and you have parts of modern day Egypt, modern day Jordan, probably a little bit of Saudi Arabia, some Syria, some Lebanon. And why is this the case? Because rather than from the Nile here on the west all the way to Iraq with the Euphrates River goes all the way up into northwest Syria. So it's more like this. And this is not something which is commonly brought out in this discussion. Yet, it's geography. So yes, the biblical borders of the state of Israel are going to be larger. The biblical borders of Israel are larger than the state of Israel. But it's not something which incorporates the entire Middle East practically. It doesn't go all the way back to where Abraham was from. But Charisma picked this up because there are people out there who are fomenting anti-Semitism, they're fomenting anti-Zionism, and they're using this as a springboard for doing so. And yeah, today's Messianic community needs to be better educated in the borders of biblical Israel. Just like there's probably a day coming when we're going to have to be better educated in biblical chronology and Genesis 5 and Genesis 11. We'll save that discussion for another time. But we're going to see the pendulum shift toward basically what a lot of good conservative Old Testament Protestant scholars have concluded. Okay, I'm sure many of you have followed the Cracker Barrel drama over the past few days. Cracker Barrel changing its logo to this generic thing. And now, because of pressure, they're going to be basically keeping their old logo. Now, this has been forwarded on by many different places, but from Charlie Kirk, Cracker Barrel is reverting back to its original logo after President Trump criticized the change. Didn't even take a day. Look, it all comes down to if you change your logo and all of a sudden you change your logo, you remodel your stores, you want to be more with it for the times, and then all of a sudden all these people are missing who you rely on for business, for your customers. People get the idea really quickly. Now, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to delve into Cracker Barrel, supporting a lot of hyper liberal and progressive causes. that sort of thing. It does ultimately come down to the food, but there is something to be observed here with what happened with, I'm sure some of you all remember when New Coke was released. Yeah, New Coke was an absolute disaster. And very quickly, Coca-Cola was losing money hand over fist, and they had to go back and re-release what they called Coca-Cola Classic. So, yeah, I'm sure that all of a sudden, in the dramatic loss of business, the dramatic loss of the stock price, like we're just gonna have to go back to where we were. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? But yeah, they're going to be people who now, investigate, look into Cracker Barrel, a little bit of the more modern history of Cracker Barrel, and wonder, okay, how influenced were they by some of these liberal and progressive causes? Okay, so our next story, and this is getting a play on social media over the past day or so because of Donald Trump signing an executive order banning burning of the U.S. flag, and if you burn the U.S. flag, you'll go to jail for a year. So this is from Laura Ingraham, a short clip. Back in 2006, the then Senator Hillary Clinton pushed for a law to ban flag burning. Today, Democrats call it free expression. Amazing how quickly their principles shift when it's politically convenient. And look, I'm sure you're going to be able to find other Democrats, other people in the past who were more on the political left than not here in the U.S., who supported laws in place to ban the burning of the U.S. flag. And now, well, they've changed their mind. Look, I don't believe that people should have to go to jail for a year for burning the U.S. flag. I do believe there should be some penalties associated with it because it's commonly associated with acts of violence, acts of aggression against law enforcement. It's not something which is peaceful. So with that in mind, here from Fox News on X, 24-second clip, man arrested after burning American flag in front of White House says he's waiting to face more serious charges after receiving just 2 citations. Okay, so you're trying to tempt the government. You're trying to tempt these new regulations. That's not good. I mean, it's like it's like in the Bible, particularly in sin entered in. You see Paul talk about in Romans. It's like once someone frequently has knowledge of a biblical commandment, rather than, okay, I want to be in compliance with God's word, I want to be in compliance with God's instruction, the human tendency is to instead do what? Immediately try to break it. That's kind of what you see here. From Alan Didio, and yes, he is a pre-tribulationist, but it's not as though pre-tribulationists don't get some things right or don't send some things on we have to pay attention to. This is actually quite useful. Daniel 12:4 says, knowledge shall increase. And here he's got a chart which he's published in 1986. All of the world's data could fit on 3,000 CDs. By 2014, it would take 1 billion CDs. Human knowledge once doubled every 100 years. Now it's said to double every 12 to 13 months. I remember when it was at the rate of every 2.5 years. Google processes 8.5 billion searches every day, each one feeding the global knowledge surge. But this isn't just tech. Prophetic knowledge is exploding. No other generation has had this much access to Bible prophecy, teaching, and revelation. Do you think Daniel's words were pointing to our day? Okay, those are some fair questions. I'm not going to totally ditch that. One of the immediate things we do have to be aware, and the Aramaic dot in the Daniel 12:4 prophecy, lacks some of that finer distinction between knowledge or wisdom, or what we would call experiential knowledge. But we do have a huge increase in information. How much of that is accurate? How much of that is inaccurate? It's difficult to keep up with a lot of things. That's why artificial intelligence has become so prominent now in different fields. Yes, many people are definitely have their concerns about that. Along with it, we know that there are ongoing questions of how much of this knowledge is going to positively versus negatively affect, in particular, younger people. Now, Alan Didio raises the question of, well, prophetic knowledge, knowledge of Bible prophecy, that is increasing. Okay, but it's not just an issue of knowledge or information, it's also an issue of being able to dialogue and interact. We can put out content all we want, we can put out questions all we want, but how are people impacted by that, hopefully for the better? And that same prophecy is connected to people will go to and fro. And yes, that's commonly, and I think rightfully so, is associated with mass transportation. In particular, like, when was the last time you went to an airport where you did not see some kind of major construction going on? They're building a new terminal, or they're having to expand an old terminal. They're having to refurbish everything because of the huge amount of people who are coming through, and they require this and they require that. There's a big element of truth to that, but I've also heard it said that going to and fro may very well be involved with knowledge is increasing, and people want to go here to find information, people want to find there to go information, and it just results in a huge amount of confusion. And those are factors we have to take into consideration as Bible teachers and as leaders. Okay, our next story, and this is from the Jerusalem Post on Instagram. Poll: over half of Likud voters and 30% of far-right supporters back ending the Gaza war as part of a hostage deal. Overall, 73.8% of Israelis favor a deal, while 26.2% want the fighting to continue, according to Agam Labs Research Institute. Okay, we know that polls come and go. What one poll says one day can change because of events the next day. We should be aware of that. But this does indicate that after almost 2 years, because soon, October the 7th, 2025 is going to come up. It's going to be the 2-year anniversary of this conflict starting. While the world itself is growing tired, growing weary of it, wants Israel to stop, various countries planning to recognize an independent Palestinian state, the Israelis themselves are growing tired and fatigued as well. Look, let's just release the hostages and let's end this thing, right? So some kind of a point event is ensuing. How is that going to work? I don't know. I don't blame people who think that, well, maybe the only person who can solve this problem in the Middle East, solve this problem, Russia and Ukraine, is the beast. I don't blame people for wanting to think in that direction, because I've thought of that about that myself. Forwarded on from Vivid, you can watch this clip. The reason why Palestinians don't have a country is crystal clear. Their society is a complete failure. Instead of focusing on education and progress, they choose to brainwash their children into becoming future terrorists. There is no peace available with those murderers. And indeed, I hope and pray that while, yes, we pray for peace in Israel, pray for the salvation of the Palestinians. Yeshua the Messiah is the only solution to this. And we know of people who have been in the Palestinian areas and they have had dramatic encounters with the risen Lord. Okay, now we're going to uncomfortably shift back toward the American home front. Some of you all may have seen this channel on X. A subscriber sent it on to me, and I had seen it before, but it's the channel Hitler Hated Christ. Pro-Christ, anti-Hitler, anti-weirdo. But here's a clip from a recent podcast between Elijah Schaffer, who used to be with Gateway Pundit and now no longer so, because he's gone, kind of off the deep end, questions a lot of the Holocaust sort of thing, and Joel Webbin right there, who's a major Christian nationalist, does not believe that a synagogue or a mosque would be able to stand in a Christian America. He does not support Israel, does not support the Jewish people, believes Jews would have to self-deport. A lot of what he says is very much along the lines of what was seen in 1930s Germany. But here, it doesn't just end with some of their views of Jewish people or Zionism. Here they talk about contemporary women, and they conclude this: women really are just a bunch of holes today. That's Holes. So women are just there for intercourse, basically. In the day, we would say that, so do you believe a woman, a female, is a person, a human being, or is a woman just there for her uterus? Well, they would definitely, as the misogynist, patriarchal types that they are, they would look at a woman just being present as a uterus. And they're getting a lot of blowback on social media, and rightfully so. And some of the things which they've said, Doug Wilson, also a Christian nationalist, he has come dangerously close to saying as well. So this is actually pretty bad. And look, in my Messianic experience, for people in some of the fringes of Hebrew roots, especially those who support plural marriage and polygamy, they've come dangerously close, or if not just openly said that, women are there pretty much just for intercourse and procreation, not looking at women as really human beings with anything to say or anything to add to the purposes of the kingdom of God. Pretty damnable, if you ask me. All right, from Visegrad 24. And this is from today, August the 27th. Xi Jinping conducts largest military leadership purge since Mao Zedong. After taking power in China for a third term in violation of party tradition, Xi Jinping began a sweeping purge of the leadership of the People's Liberation Army, PLA, in 2023. Nearly one-fifth of the senior generals, many appointed by Xi himself, have disappeared, come under investigation, or ended up behind bars. Such a scale of removal hasn't been seen since the Cultural Revolution. Now, of course, we don't know all of the details of what goes on in China, but you see something like this take place and you wonder, okay, on one side, are you trying to clear up corruption? On the other side, are you trying to install new leaders who are loyal to you? And then the third option, which can get is speculation, but it'll be like, so are you putting your people in there because you're planning some kind of a major military action, i.e. with Taiwan, sometime in the future, and you want the right people in the right place? I mean, these are all the things which go into this. We know that China is not an open society. We know it's, while they have one of the largest growing Christian populations, a lot of the believers are underground. And if you go to an official Chinese-approved government church, all of the messages have to be pre-approved by the Communist Party. They've got to be in line with communist ideology, and you have no privacy. Everything you do is monitored very closely. So yeah, when people see these kinds of things, they rightly wonder, okay, Lord, when are we going to just have to live in this anxiety with what's happening here in the world, what's happening there in the world, or let's just get on with it. Let's just get on with the end times and see the Messiah return and true peace and righteousness prevail. Okay, we got two more stories. These are actually kind of encouraging. Passed on from Eyal Yacobi, Reuters, from today. Germany rejects the recognition of a Palestinian state. Finally, a European country that is not rewarding Hamas. That's his commentary. And likewise passed on from Vivid. Germany refuses to recognize a Palestinian state and will not join France, Australia, and Canada at the UN General Assembly in September. Thank you, Germany. Now, we know that all of this is something which can change. Germany can decide, well, we're going to recognize a Palestinian state. Likewise, countries which have said we're going to recognize a Palestinian state can pull back and say we're not ready to recognize a Palestinian state. That is the nature of the news cycle. So I encourage you, continue to pray peace between Israel and Gaza. And number two, continue to pray peace, Russia, Ukraine. And of course, pray for wisdom as we see things unfold here on the American home front. Because, yeah, there are a lot of things we do need to be concerned about for certain. And we don't know what is going to happen between now and the fall high holidays. We definitely believe that we need to be paying attention nevertheless. And not as many people as who should be paying attention are. And how many of those people are going to be caught unaware by just a number of the things I've mentioned today in our news roundup. Okay, before I forget, all of these stories I went through, the links will be provided when this episode is archived later today on MessianicApologetics.net. So you can go read the articles for yourself, watch the different news clips, and evaluate it. As always, on behalf of Outreach Israel Ministries and Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing encouragement, prayers, and support for all of our ministry efforts. I encourage you to check out our ministry website at MessianicApologetics.net. There you can access a wide number of free articles, frequently asked questions. You can look at some of the back episodes of Messianic Insider, McKee Moment Shorts, and you can check out some of our other adventures as a ministry and family. We'll see you again tomorrow with another episode of Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you, shalom, and take care.